Hello my dear friend, welcome back to my channel. This is Junie's Plan With Me. February is right around the corner and what comes with it is Valentine's Day. We all know that rose represents love, so for this month I decided to go with rose theme. It's maybe a little bit cliche, but I really like how the setup turns out, especially the cover pop-up. So I hope this video can also be helpful or inspiring if you're planning to make a gift card by yourself to the one you love. Today we're also going to have a simple tutorial on watercolor rose, so I hope you'll enjoy watching it. First thing first, I made a guideline for the pop-up so you can understand it better. The main structure has 3 parts. The first one is a semicircle with the extra part at the ends for gluing, evenly divided into 6 sections, so each section is 15 degrees. As for the radius, I use 5.5 cm, but you can also change it based on how big you want to make it. The second piece is a quarter circle with 7 cm radius, evenly divided into 6 sections too, so each section is 7.5 degrees. Then on the second and the fourth folding line, find the center point to divide them into half, 3.5 and 3.5 cm. Then connect those dots to make an extra W. The last piece is the bottom part of the bouquet, and it's smaller but similar structure as the second piece, except I divide it into 4 sections to make it easier to fold later. With all the basic structure set up, we also need some flowers. Here I created this template and it's available in my Etsy shop as digital download. Of course, you can also draw out whatever flowers you like, doesn't have to be roses. After cutting them all out, now let's start folding. The gluing part will always go to the back, then for the first piece, I just follow the line and fold back and forth. Remember the first one needs to go forward, followed by an opposite direction, one by one until the last fold. So it's like a simple Chinese fan structure. The second piece is pretty much the same. Fold the glue section backward, then follow what we did on the previous one, fold back and forth, but this time we also need to fold the extra W shape forward. As for the last piece, it's the same except there will be 3 folding marks instead of 5 to make it easy. I hope the folding steps is clear enough for you, and now grab your notebook or card base, it's time to reassemble them together. This pop-up works in the middle binding line, but depends on where you want it to be, you can place it higher or lower. For me, I just placed the flower part a little bit higher than the middle area so I have space for the holding section and title under it. As for the angle, I use the notebook's DOS grid as reference, and in my setup I use 2:1 as you can see. The glue I'm using is a Linus Tacky glue, and I'll leave the information and links to all the supplies I'm using in this video in the description box down below. So I put glue on one side and put it on the right page, then place glue on the other side and close the notebook. In this way, you can get a more accurate spot and won't have the problem of not being able to fully close the notebook. Now this part is done, and now let's move on to the second one. The angle for this piece could vary based on how you want it to look like. If you want the bouquet holding part to be more narrow, then put it lower, or if you want it to be wider, then start from a higher point. Either way, make sure there is some gap between the first and the second piece so they won't interact with each other too much, especially after placing the flowers in. Also, when you glue the left part, make sure the first piece is folding into the middle of it so it can successfully glue on the left page of the notebook. And if there's any part doesn't glue well, I would suggest you to put a little bit of glue on the tip of the knife and tuck it in. The next step should be gluing the bottom part of the bouquet, but obviously I forgot. So now let's work on the flower first and get back to the small triangle piece later. This time I won't use the strong glue. Instead, I choose this tape glue, which is easy to remove if you want to take it off and replace it. So for the flower part, there's no rule. Just follow your heart and place them wherever you want. You can glue on top of the first piece or on the back of the second piece. The only thing you need to pay attention is that every time after gluing a few flowers on, check it if you can fold it perfectly. It's easy at the beginning, but as you start to put more and more flowers on, it may get a little bit complicated and start to tangle with each other. But take your time, just treat it as you're actually doing real flowers. This is my third time playing around with this pop-up design, and I still need to figure out exactly which one should go where to make it look pretty and well balanced. Oh, another thing I want to mention is that unlike the previous pop-up where I suggest you to use thick paper, today's setup you just need to use the regular printing paper because as you can see there will be so many layers overlaid at the end and it could make your journal really bulky. But of course, if you're planning to apply on a gift card, feel free to use thick paper to make it stronger. Again, remember to close the notebook and check every once in a while when you're placing the flowers. I didn't do it during the process because I pretty much have an idea where it should go to make sure they won't interact each other. But for your first time, you still want to check it often if you don't want to end up not being able to close your notebook at the end. And now let's get back to the last piece, which is quite easy to set up if you have no problem making the previous ones. Since this one's too tiny, I just simply eyeball the left side position and manually glue it on. So this pop-up is pretty much done. The next is to add some detail and decorations. I use Tumble Dual Brush Pen 772, a really warm pink, to draw a little bow tie and then use 837 to write down February. As for the font, I decided to go with this cursive style because I think it just matches the overall feeling. And at both ends, I also draw some arrows so the whole setup looks like an arrow from the Cupid, if that makes sense to you. Then I use the same color to add some shades on the bow tie to make it more real and cuter. The background is kind of boring right now, so I'm going to add some splashes with this sparkle watercolor, and the colors I chose are red and gold. Of course, you can also go with other colors or other medias like gouache or acrylic. The cover page is actually already done at this point, but then I suddenly have an idea of adding some hearts elements, so here we go. You've probably seen it in my October Plan With Me video in which I also use these hard plastic pieces to add a star. So same here, I cut out a short strap and glue a mini heart on one end and glue the other end to the back of one of the flowers. You can also change it to other stuff like butterflies or bees. And here I only made 3, feel free to add more if you want. Just make sure that they can fold back in well when you close the notebook. So yeah, now we're officially done with the cover page. If you have any questions, leave comments down below and let me know. And now let's move on to the next spread, monthly view. This time I want to try a different layout, which you'll see in a moment. And as you already saw the pencil guide, I actually did a really detailed line work, but I wasn't happy with the test, so I decided to go with watercolor on watercolor paper at the end. This is a practice I did earlier and I'm going to redraw it again with you today. But before that, I want to quickly mention that I also turned into digital as part of my February Bujo kit. There are 3 pages of watercolor rose drawings, 1 washi tape, 1 February title page which I spell wrong but I fixed later, 1 subtitle page, 1 Disney week, and 1 mini calendar page. You can find them either in my Etsy shop or in my Patreon community, and I hope they can make your Bujo journey easier and more fun. Without further ado, now let's start our today's watercolor tutorial. So first is to use pencil to draw a rough guideline. It doesn't have to be super accurate, as long as you can locate where the flowers are and how big you want each of them to be. And then erase the repeated lines to make it more clear for later. As for the brushes, what I use are number 2 and number 12. For this practice, I would suggest you to choose the round shaped one with big belly so it can contain more water and pigment. In the beginning, I usually like to make a color palette first. No matter what brand of watercolor you're using, just pick a few different shades of red with some purple or peach or orange tone to make a combination you like. With that all set, let's get started. Use decent amount of pigment on the tip of your brush and start to draw some random dots shaped into a curving line around the center, and then continue the wave using the belly of the brush. Leave some random gaps between each other, but they can also be partially connected. And as the flower gets bigger and bigger, start to shape the petal on the top slightly thinner because we want the rose to face upward a little bit. But in the front, try to draw each petal bigger as it gets further from the center. And I personally also like to add in some pigment when it's all wet, so it looks more natural and smooth. Same for the second one, and this time I try to add a little bit of orange color. As we draw from the center to wider area, you can see me start to add in some water to make a lighter color, so the rose can look more real because there are many layers of petal in the middle, but less as it goes outward. Then I also go back again to add even darker purplish pink in the first one, but depends on how many details you want, you don't have to do this step. The third one, I want to have a widely open rose, so after a few small strokes in the center, I start to draw each petal pretty big. Oh, another tip for you if you want to have darker colors, instead of keeping adding the same color pigment or even black, try complementary colors. For example, green to red, blue to orange. After the last rose, it's time to add some leaves in. In order to make it more interesting, I'm not following exactly how rose leaves look like. Instead, I just go with different shapes and different shades of green to give it more variety. Oh, I almost forgot those two rosebuds on the side. Let me add them in and then use brown to draw out the wood color palette and then color it with lighter brown. And don't forget to add some shadows too. Then define the edges of the rose, and again, you can skip this step if you want. To be honest, I started this channel to share some watercolor drawing at the beginning, but then I found out about bullet journal and switched the main content to this. So I haven't been drawing watercolor that much lately, and this setup just brought me back into it, so I'm really happy about it. I know using watercolor in bullet journal is a little bit extreme, and most of you probably prefer to use colorful brush pens, but I highly recommend you to give it a try if you're interested, and there will be a lot of fun. Okay, now I glue this drawing piece on my notebook, then I start to draw some lines out of the center with dots at the end. But right now I only have a few days scheduled with events, so I'll leave the rest here for later. Again, I want to add some shiny elements in, so I use the same technique to add the red and gold splash on it. And at the end, I also apply a little bit shiny red on the edges of the rose, which look really cool under the lights. Now let's move on to the next spread. For a mood checker, I just use a subtitle sticker from my Bujo kit, and then under it, as you may already saw the pencil guide, I'm going to draw a big rose with 28 petals to represent 28 days. It actually ends up more than 28 petals, but I just decided to let it be and fill the extra at the end of this month. Then I used Tumble brush pen to color the leaves, which didn't turn out how I wanted to be, but things happen, and I hope it can look better after adding the different shades of pink as time goes by. I know February has perfect 4 weeks this year, and it will be so satisfying to draw the calendar with Monday to Sunday multiplied by 4 times. But here I still decide to go with my favorite X and Y axis style, except I change a little bit, so the date bar is in the center and the habits and sleep log are on 2 sides. So this page is quite simple, and the next one will be my weekly spread. As you can see, I already cut out the red edge based on the rose pencil guide I pre-draw, so I can also determine the drawing on the back. But back then, I wasn't thinking of using watercolor, so my suggestion is finish the drawing in the front first, then cut it, and that will be more accurate. But before jumping into that, I want to work on the layout first. The left column will be used as note, and that's what I like the most of Dutch Door. You can just use the same section through the whole month without flipping back and forth, and it could be monthly goal, focus, to-do list, or notes. As for the weekly layout, I really like how my last month setup turned out, so I'm going to continue the same style. By placing all 7 days on one page, each day gets 5 lines, which is actually enough even for 8 or 10 tasks, but of course I have to write letters a little bit smaller compared to before. Now let's cut the Dutch Door away and work on the 3rd and 4th week. Speaking of which, I actually did a lot of Dutch Door in the past 1 year, and my favorite one is the planet theme I did for my husband in August, in which I made different planets on the edge of each Dutch Door, and it looks so cool that I regret that how come I didn't use it on mine. Anyway, I'm thinking to recreate one day in my bullet journal too. Okay, after the weekly layouts, it's time to draw the roses again. Unlike watercolor paper, regular notebook either cannot hold water that well or absorb it too quickly, but this year I chose Notebook Therapy as my journal and I'm really happy with how it can handle watercolor. Of course, you can't expect it to work like watercolor paper, but I think it's good for most of drawings as long as you don't use too much water. I also made a review video about it, so you can take a look if you're interested. By the way, you can also get 10% off with my coupon code JUNISUN10 while purchasing. As I'm drawing the roses, I also want to quickly mention that you can find the printable of all my bullet journal spreads as part of the bonus content I offer in my Patreon community. If you're interested in downloading it and supporting this channel in the meanwhile, check out the link in the right up corner, and the tier starts from $1 as monthly subscription. So there will be some time left here while me drawing the roses one by one. You can follow me along, try drawing some roses, or just grab a cup of tea, sit comfortably, and enjoy watching. I'll be back for the next page and steps shortly. Okay, now we're on the last spread. Usually I like to put bring down page before weekly spreads, but I figured that looking at what I've came up with in this month while doing monthly summary and plan out the next month is a pretty good idea. So I migrate to the last spread next to the monthly summary. Then I place the minute calendar on the right down corner of the last page, which could show up on the weekly spreads perfectly. Then I use a corner cutter to run the Dutch doors. Again, add some shining red pigment to the roses and drop the splashes overall to make the whole setup more cohesive. Then on the final step, of course, is to place some washi tapes in. And that's all I want to share with you today. As I'm doing the final flip through, I want to give a special thank you to my new Patreon members. Francesca, Kay, Michelle, Brianna, Carla, Lone, Mary, Jennifer, Roxine, Ellie, Andrea, Beth, Tiara, Charlene, Andrea, Karen, Kelly, Nicole, Joy, and is Debbie fit yet? Thank you so much, and your support means a lot to me and this channel. If you like this video, please click like and consider subscribing. Also, don't forget to turn on the bell so you can receive the notification when I upload new videos. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an amazing February. Also, happy Valentine's Day, my dear friends. I'll see you very soon in my next one. Bye!